So this movie is credited for bringing the direct attitude of lesbianism in vampire movies. The Vampire Lovers. Now, this 1970 British Gothic horror film was directed by Roy Ward Baker and starred Ingrid Pitt, Peter Cushing, George Cole, Kate O'Mara, Madeline Smith, Don Adams, and John Finch. It was produced by Hammer. It was based on the 1872 Sheridan Le Fanu novella Carmilla and is the first film in a Karnstein trilogy, the other two films being Lust for a Vampire and Twins of Evil. The three films were somewhat daring for the time in explicitly depicting lesbian themes. Now, the poster says, "Taste the deadly passion of the blood nymphs, the vampire lovers." Now, in Citria, 1794, a female vampire in a diaphanous gown materializes from a misty graveyard and kills a man she lures out of a tavern. While going back to her grave, she finds her shroud missing. She was thus forced to face Baron Hartog, a vampire hunter who was stalking her in order to avenge the death of his sister. He decapitates her. Decades later, Austrian General Spilsdorf is throwing a ball in his estate to celebrate the birthday of his niece Laura. A countess who was recently moved to the general's neighboring property is in attendance with her daughter Marcella. After talking with a mysterious man in black, probably not Johnny Cash, the countess tells the general she has to go visit a sick relatives and ask him to care for Marcella in her absence. Now, Laura starts experiencing violent nightmares when she's attacked by a giant cat, then dies of gradual anemia. On her breasts, 2 puncture wounds are discovered. Marcella disappears and General Spilsdorf leaves to find Baron Hartog. Now Marcella, now going by the alias Carmilla, is reunited with the Countess. They stage a carriage breakdown near the residence of Mr. Morton, a wealthy Englishman living in Citria and a friend of the General's. Once again, the Countess manipulates Mr. Morton into offering hospitality to her alleged relative, this time introduced as her niece. Carmilla later attempts to seduce Morton's daughter Emma, who resists her more romantic overtures. Emma also falls ill and starts suffering from nightmares of the giant cat, while her breasts show the same wounds as Laura. After Emma's father has gone to Vienna on a business trip, Emma's governess, Mademoiselle Peridot, is seduced by Carmilla and becomes her accomplice after sleeping with her. Meanwhile, Carmilla has started feeding on people from the nearby village, causing several mysterious deaths where the corpses are drained of all blood. Now, Morton's Balter Renton learns about local vampire superstitions and enlists the help of the doctor who had already treated Laura. They use garlic flowers and crucifixes to ward Emma, who is now dying. Carmilla kills the doctor on the road. She then seduces and subjugates Renton, who was under the impression the only real vampire was Mademoiselle Peridot. While Renton under her control, Carmilla manages to have the wards removed. Knowing she has been found out, she dispatches Renton with the intention of retreating into her grave and taking Emma with her as her lover. Now, Morton, who was called home by Renton, meets General Spiegelstoff and Baron Hartog, who were on their way to the ruins of Campstein Castle, along with Laura's fiancé, Karl. Hartog reveals that the Campsteins were a family of vampires from the 16th century. In his youth, he managed to destroy nearly all of them, starting with the female vampire who had killed his sister. However, he could not find the grave of Marcella Karnstein. Looking at her portrait in the castle hall, Spilsdorf and Morton realize she's the same girl they separately know as Marcella and Carmilla. Karl makes haste and rides back to Morton's to rescue Emma, which is a trope that's quite interesting in the movie. As Marcella prepares to leave with Emma, Mademoiselle Peridot begs to be taken with her. Marcella kills and drains her instead. Karl arrives and chases Marcella away using a poignard as a cross. Marcella dematerializes and flees to Karnstein Castle, where the Baron and others await for her return. Once located in their resting coffin, General Spilsdorf drives the stake into Camilla's heart and cuts off her head, thus avenging his daughter's death. Emma is freed of the vampire sickness and influence. Meanwhile, the image of Marcella and her portrait on the wall turns into a fanged skeleton. A mysterious man in black watches all these events from a distance, occasionally laughing with contempt. Now, all of this for less than £170,000 of a budget. Released October 4th, 1970, 91 minutes. Co-distributor was AIP, which, that's part of it. And Peter Cushing, has a good role here, but the big stars are the women. Now, directed again by Roy Ward Baker. Adaptation by Harry Fine, Tudor Gates, and Michael Stile. Stile and Fine produce it. And again, cinematography by Moray Grant. Well, I know for a fact this movie was banned from certain movies and drive-ins throughout New Brunswick and Quebec because at the time I don't think it had a rating on it, so it wasn't released up until later. Now, obviously, the film being a co-production of Hammer AIP was strong because AIP was interested in a vampire movie with more explicit sexual content to take advantage of the more relaxed censorship environment. It was decided to adapt Carmilla. Fine and Style were the two producers. They formed a company called Fantail, along with writer Tudor Gates. Harry Fine's wife, Nat Cohn, who introduced him to James Carrias, Fine suggested the film Carmilla. Tudor Gates said Carrias was enthusiastic and sold it instantly to AIP based on the poster. The old Robert Evans thing. If you see the poster, you see the movie. Now, before production, the script of Vampire's Lovers was sent to chief censor John Treleaven, who warned the studio about depictions of lesbianism, pointing out their previous lesbian film, The Killing of Sister George, had 5 minutes excised by his office. In response, Hammer replied that the lesbianism was not of their doing, but it was presented in the original story by Le Fanu. Treleaven backed down as a result. Now, production of the movie began in Elstree. On January 1997, he used locations in the grounds of Moore Park, Hednesford, standing in from Citria, Central Europe. Produced on a relatively low budget of £165 £227 UK. It was the final Hammer film to be financed with American money. Most of the later films were backed by Rank or AMI. Gates thought EIP gave Hammer $400,000, so Jimmy had change left over. He said Fantail, whose company with Fine and Styles, had a 25% profit stake, which was very lucrative. Now, while filming a scene in which Carmilla attacks Madame Pardieu, Ingrid Pitt's fangs kept falling on her mouth and dropping into Kate O'Mara's cleavage, prompting gales of uncontrollable laughter from both actresses. Finally, Pitt grabbed some chewing gum from the mouth of one of her crew members and used it to secure her fangs. Now, The Vampire Lovers has received mixed reception from critics. Variety called the story not great and had fairly flat dialogue, but the script had all the needed ingredients. The New York Times called it a departure from the hackneyed bloody norm, professionally directed, optimally staged, and sexy to boot. The Monthly Film Bulletin declared rather below par, even by recent Hammer standings. Now, Dave Kerr wrote a favorable retrospective review for Chicago Reader, writing that the film resulted from the last significant surge of creative energy at Hammer. Now, AllMovie wrote that this Hammer Films production isn't her finest moment, but it's easy to understand why it's become an enduring cult favorite with horror fans. The Vampire Lovers pushes the blood shed in bosoms formula of the Hammer hits to his limit. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 76% based on 20 reviews. Now, The Lovers have been released on DVD on MGM in 2003, and also Scream Factory put it on a Blu-ray on April 30, 2013. A collector's edition of this was released with a new 4K scan on December 21st, 2021. So it's got a little bit of respect. Now, obviously, there's always going to be a lesbian overtones with Dracula, especially because with his wives. Would they join together and then have an erotic feast afterwards? Killing a baby, killing an animal or whatever. But like I said, when this movie came out, it's like everybody was expecting the straight ahead Cushing Lee Dracula movie. This goes beyond the pale, and I don't think it's ever been shown on Canadian TV since maybe the early '80s. If anybody knows, it has been shown. But I mean, it's a cult favorite at a lot of late night showings through the years because lesbianism and vampires. There's a lot of LGBTQ people that like that style of the vampirism. They want to see a little bit of lesbianism as well, because usually with the vampire legend, the women are stronger than the people they bite. Gay or straight. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's my take on The Vampire Lovers. A very interesting dip, a bloody dip in the last Hammer film to have U.S. Production money. If you like what we're doing here with our Hammer reviews, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share. Have a great one and take care. Bye.